Okay, I think we have almost a full house, and I think we can get going. Thanks for coming back, everybody. This is, again, CS 581 Media Innovation, and I hope everybody enjoyed our session last week with Franklin Four. I thought that was really, really interesting and really fun. Before we start today's session, let me talk a little bit about some logistics and housekeeping items here. And let me reintroduce myself, because it was we were in sort of two spots last class. So if you're new, and if I haven't met you, my name's Ann Grimes. I've been teaching here at Stanford since 2005. I previously was in the Department of Communication, where I served as the director of the journalism program for 2 terms, 8 years. It was really fun. And last year I moved over here to the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, which is a bicoastal institute anchored here at Stanford Engineering and at Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism. So I co-direct the institute and helped this year launch this fantastic new space. You are the first guys in this class, in this space. So congratulations to you. Yay. Thanks for breaking it in. My background is journalism. I was a Knight Fellow. Knight Fellows, raise your hand. Okay, welcome. I was a Knight Fellow in 1998 here at Stanford, and before that I was at the Washington Post. And then subsequent to that, I joined the Wall Street Journal, where I was a deputy bureau chief in San Francisco and covered all things tech. Saw the dot-com rise, dot-com boom and bust. Anyway, so the goal of this class is to introduce all of you to what is possible and probable when it comes to media innovation. We have sort of two intentions here. One is to get you jazzed and excited, especially those of you who are computer science and business students, about the space at the intersection of media and technology. And the Brown Institute also funds projects. We fund about a dozen projects each year. Some are anchored in New York, some are anchored here at Stanford, and some are bi-coastal. So we hope that by bringing together this interdisciplinary group, you guys will get to know each other and maybe pitch us some proposals when our proposal call happens in the spring. So to get you going, we have pulled together a great lineup of speakers from media and journalism, from industry, and from academia. And we're going to hear from them on how they see the shifting media landscape, the challenges and the opportunities, and it's your chance to ask them all kinds of questions. So let me just say quickly a little bit about the arc of the class. Last week we kicked off with a big picture discussion about the social fallout that's happening from in the tech sector, especially with the big platforms. Today we're going to continue with a big picture discussion of how to identify, forecast, and catch what might be new trends at the intersection of media and technology, and how to identify what...
Excuse me, please don't lock the door.
Hi, you can sit down there. And how to identify what Paul Sappho in one of our readings today called the S-curve, or the power curve. Next, we're going to move on to more sector discussions on innovations in the public sphere, security. We're going to hear from Jeff Larson, who wrote a great story for ProPublica about how they hacked Mar-a-Lago down in Florida, which should be really fun. We're going to hear about new developments in data, visual communications, fake news, video, and artificial intelligence. So hopefully we have big picture here, then we'll do some sort of sector breakouts, and then wind up with a discussion about AI, which seems to be sort of like the overall cool thing that's happening, and it should be an interesting discussion. A final word about logistics. If you haven't already signed up, there are about 30 people who are registered for the class. I'm not talking about the auditors, but if you have registered for the class, we want each week 4 people to lead the class discussion. So please do that if you have not done that already. Otherwise, we will assign you to a week. pick a week on a topic that you're interested in. And if you have trouble signing up, let us know. We're looking for 4 people each week. You may miss one class. If you miss a class, there is a makeup summary requirement on the syllabus, so we'll expect to see that from you. And then with the Knight Fellows, we're going to take a body count at the end of the day, and we'll let you know if we can let you in. I think it should be okay, but there are fire marshals breathing down our necks, so we'll let you know. And then we'll have you register for Canvas or however it works. Okay, so we'll do that. Let me say one last thing. The Brown Institute is also going to host 2 outside of this Media Innovation Series. We're hosting 2. We have the Fall Speaker Series. And for those of you who like podcasting, we're going to be hosting Dan Carlin on October 11th. So we'll send you some information about that, but he'll be talking about the explosion in the podcasting space. And then on November 14th, we're going to be hosting Richard Gingras, who is VP of News at Google, and he's going to be talking about media and trust. So please put those on your calendar. Okay. So today we welcome Cecilia Stallsmith, who is the Senior Manager for Platform and Partner Marketing at Slack. As Slack's head of platform marketing, Ceci has been a key member of the startup's original platform team since she joined in 2015. She leads a small team that brings together customers, developers, and partners like Salesforce and Google onto the platform. She is also a program advisor to HeavyBit Industries. HeavyBit helps startups turn products loved by developers into successful businesses. So she's got a foot in tech and in the business side. Earlier, before Slack, she was an associate at Bessemer Venture Partners, where she helped source deals. Prior to her work at Bessemer, she helped establish the Developers Relations Group at Box. In January, Ceci was named a Forbes 30 under 30 Young Innovator in Tech, which is a real coup. And she is a graduate of Stanford. So welcome back to the farm.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Hi, everyone. I'm Ceci. I'm really excited to be back here because I love Stanford. So Anne walked through my background. If you want me to sort of weave the story through Box, Bessemer, and Slack, the short version is I'm a psych and English double major who thought like teaching was going to be my path and maybe psych. I don't know. And then suddenly I started taking classes like this my senior year of Stanford and added my English major and was like, shoot, what am I doing? And I watched Aaron Levy, who is the CEO of Box, give a talk at the Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders course, if you've heard of that one. And literally just was like, I have to work for him. So I emailed Aaron and was like, I've got to work for you. Had an extra summer and got a job at Box where I was a founding member, even though I had no technical skills, of the platform team. So I did developer relations. Developer relations literally means relating to developers, debugging their code. It was super interesting. I got to do a lot of different things there, including product, and worked on the mobile ecosystem. I went to Bessemer because a lot of what I did on mobile was predict trends. So I went to Bessemer. I got to do 5 investments in the 1 year that I stayed in venture. And basically the role at Slack came to me, and at Bessemer you spend all your time evaluating company data. So it's like, how well are they growing? Are they going to be interesting? Should we, put money in this company? And then I saw Slack's numbers and was like, I have to go to Slack. So if you don't know what Slack is a messaging platform for people at work. It's used by 6 million people every single day. It's the fastest growing company in the enterprise software category ever to exist. We're at over 200 million in annually recurring revenue. It's been a really fun journey. So I've been at Slack 2 years officially on the 28th. So it's been a really fun journey. So I'm here. The title of my talk is this Frameworks for Predicting Trends. But I want to give you the real title for my talk, which is Trend Predicting for Fun and Profit, or The Art of Getting Lucky. Because let's be real, if people could predict trends perfectly, there wouldn't be competition in venture capital. If you could predict trends perfectly, you'd have the same person investing in Cisco and Oracle and Salesforce and Microsoft and then all the major enterprise platforms today, and same thing for consumer. But that's all different venture capitalists because no one can predict it perfectly. There are a lot of X factors. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is how fraught some of these frameworks can be and how to sort of triangulate to the best of your ability. So to start, I thought it was fun to just like zero in here on what is luck. I just Googled one of these, ways to get lucky article. Honestly, if you Google this, you find like 10 listicles. This is the kind of stuff that my mom loves to send me on Friday nights. I always end up with like many lists from her. But it's funny when you think about trend predicting, especially if you did the reading, a lot of the lists of how to predict trends actually look a little bit like the list of how to make your own luck. It's sort of like, be optimistic, think about the possibilities, shoot for the moon. Like, those are actually decent ways to think about trend predicting. So I want to sort of go into this talk with the understanding that this is fuzzy. There is no science behind this, and like, honestly, if you were perfect at trend predicting and like if this was all science, the segue would have never happened. But the segue was going to be really hot and then never existed as anything interesting. So I wanted to start by doing something a little more interactive and look at a couple trends. If we look at trends that we know exist today, my question is like, how could you have predicted this trend before it happened? My first trend is yogurt. Yogurt has blown up. It's gone from a $60 million industry to a $1.5 billion industry in the last 10 years, or 5 years. This is an old chart. How could you have predicted that yogurt was going to be huge? Someone try. Go for it.
Thinking about increase in the need for convenient food because of the way people are working, the way the workforce is changing,
Yeah.
the lifestyle is changing, there would be a higher demand for any food that's more convenient.
Totally. On the go. I like that.
Also, there's more of a trend towards like healthy eating, like active lifestyle. So like yogurt is like, what is the term, like macro, like it's your macro.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yogurt is good for you.
yeah,
Probiotics,
Yeah.
this whole like antibiotics movement.
yeah.
Greek yogurt for some reason. I don't even think it tastes that good, but you know what? We're all really into it. So yogurt, like this is a weird trend, but it's been huge. And if you were, the Icelandic guy Siggy and had built Siggy, you'd be killing it right now. Airbnb. What were trends that could have pointed to like Airbnb was gonna get really massive? You can just name things that people call trends. I'll throw one out there. The sharing economy. I really think they just invented that one after it happened. Any other thoughts on this one?
Too many things in your closets or your garage or too many rooms in your house that are empty.
Yeah, I have all this stuff. Why can't I make some money off of it?
Rent is expensive in nice areas, and so people can't buy a house or homes place people want to visit.
It's this natural market. You want to help pay for your rent. You want to get going. So Airbnb, very positive that way. Other one is just millennials. I think that there's this fact of like this younger generation is growing up and they're more open and more minimalist and they're willing to share things. And so it's a sharing economy / millennials are weird and everyone's still scratching their heads over why millennials do things. Coconuts! Why the hell is coconut oil so popular? This one is kind of a trick question because I don't know. I really actually think this one is because someone who's a coconut farmer hired a really good ad agency and they figured out how to make everyone feel convinced that coconut is good for you. Coconut is like a healthy fat in some ways, but it's also, the American Heart Association had to come out like a month ago and be like, this is not good for you. Like, this is just eating pure fat. So be careful about eating too much yogurt. Or too much coconut. Sorry, this is not working. Not now. Hey, Daniel, how can I make it go again? Should I unplug and replug?
Yeah, try that. So.
Oh, we're back. Back without my slides. Sorry, y'all. Reset. Nope.
Do you see the window? Yeah.
Oh. All right, I lost my speaker notes though. I lost my speaker notes. Let me see if there's any way I can get this back. I might not be able to. We'll see. All right. So what I'm trying to kind of convey with this intro is that trend spotting is an art, not a science. There are some really good things that you can grab onto to try and figure out how to create frameworks for predicting trends, but you have to be really, really fluid in the way that you think about it. The second one is that I want to leave you with a really clear set of takeaways that you can use for the future coming out of this talk, and I'm just going to highlight those on like takeaway slides because that's easier. And the last one is that this is just fun, like trend spotting, except environmental trends tend to be very depressing. Other trends can be depressing, but we're going to stick to like pretty fun trends that are really intriguing. And like, I think the key to getting into all of this is just being curious and having a good time with it. You know, like go watch a YouTube video on a girl making fun of how many ways you can use coconut oil. Like solves your problems with your boyfriend. Like coconut oil is supposed to be the solution for everything. It's a hilarious trend. Let's all enjoy ourselves. So here's what we're going to go through today. We're going to focus on the software platforms one. I think you were asked to read my article that I wrote a little while ago. I'm going to go a little more in depth on that. And then we'll go into other just really intriguing areas that I think are fun to look at for trends, particularly space tech, and then developer platforms, which is sort of my forte. And then finally, we'll get into media and takeaways. So this is why I'm here. I wrote this piece about how software in enterprise goes through these waves where you have a platform that sort of springs up and developers kind of get excited about that platform. It grows the customer base because developers make it more useful and extensible, and eventually the next major platform pops out of that. I'm going to break down how that works more in depth because I think that I make a lot of assumptions about the people who are reading this article, and I want to show you what the developer part means. And I sort of pre-saw some of your questions, so I can actually answer some of them up front. So here's the framework. I just described it. I'm not going to say it again. But this is the most helpful thing for us to look at. So the kind of platform that I'm talking about is generally an enterprise or consumer tech platform where the developer comes to join and access customers. So the first step is that you, as a piece of software or a piece of hardware, or whatever your device is, needs to have users. So start with customers. Developers or large businesses and partners, they really want to do one thing, and that is get customers and make money. There are other kinds of platforms that exist in the world. I'm not going to go into those. Those are more useful for like the actual technology. But in this case, where we're talking about platforms with lots of customers, a developer or a partner company wants to come and access the customers. So they build an integration with your platform. The easiest way for us to think about this, and I'll get into that example, is iOS, but I'll go in more depth. And the fact that they build the integration means that they add some value to the actual product that they built on top of, making it more useful for the customer and causing customers to say, wow, this thing is really great. I'm going to keep using it. Or wow, this thing is really great. You should use it. Like, everyone get on this platform. So let's look at how this worked for iOS because it's the easiest example. And I don't know how like foreign or familiar this idea of developer platforms is to everyone in the room, so I want to break it down really clearly. Before we get there, here's a really interesting thing about Android versus iOS. Android users generally come from lower income areas. iOS users are higher income, higher education, and more engaged, and they spend more time per app. So as a developer, if I'm thinking about that framework, when it comes to like which platform I build for first, especially back in the like early days of mobile, iOS was the platform of choice. So if we go back to when the iPhone came out and they opened the App Store, which was debated back in the day, iPhone had a really, really strong initial launch. And it showed up that they had strong customer pickup, probably in these higher income demographics. Developers and partners saw this opportunity, so they rushed to build for it. But people were still rushing to build for Android too. In the early days, it was like, who's going to win, Android or iOS? We don't know. Apple was super smart, and they controlled their developers like crazy. They forced them to build really good apps. So if you had a bad app, you were not allowed on the Apple App Store. iOS users adopted these apps and found them really helpful. Like, you use your phone because of the apps on it. And in the early days, iOS just had better apps. It's kind of equal now. And apps set the iPhone apart, which caused the iPhone to get a lot more customers. So back in like 2011, 2012, 2013, there was sort of this like gold rush for mobile apps because mobile was the next big hot thing. And iOS really won in terms of being iOS first. Like I've worked with lots of app developers back then, and everyone was iOS first because iOS users paid, and that caused Apple to sort of get more acceleration and move faster. So this is the value of a platform and getting developers on your platform that I'm trying to talk about. Does that make sense? Cool. So in my other article, I basically wrote about how this went from Windows, so the PC and Microsoft with Windows operating system, won out in the 90s. So back then, PCs with Windows on them were way cooler than Macs, and they were the dominant computing paradigm. And then out of that computing paradigm grew the internet. So we all spent all of our time focusing on Windows, and developers built for it, and then the internet came, and then mobile came, and now messaging's come. So that's sort of the framework that I've built here. But I want to just caveat with something big. There was so much more that went into Windows' success than like just the framework that I'm talking about here. Like Windows had a million strategies that all contributed to their success, and like look at them now. They're not the winner now. They were the winner in the 90s. They were really hard to unseat, but these things all come in waves, and there are a lot more factors at play. A framework for predicting trends is a simplification that does ignore a lot of really obvious pieces. So for example, with iOS, the thing that I'm ignoring is like their focus on design. That set them apart. It made them better. And that might be one of their biggest contributing factors. For Windows, their IBM partnership strategy might have been the thing that set them apart and made them better, but they also had the developer flywheel, which is what this is called, or like the platform flywheel, and that made them very hard to unentrench because all the good products were built on top of Windows. If you read my piece and look at like what trends I go through, there's also one really obvious one that's sort of missing. The cloud. So cloud computing in like the aughts was sort of like the hot thing, and I just kind of glossed over it and was like the internet emerged and companies like Amazon and Salesforce grew up on it. Really, they'd call that cloud computing, but I kind of just was like, for the sake of everyone reading this article and making it, understandable, I'm going to just move forward. So important to see. Again, this is macro level trends. This is not a perfect science. So let's just go back to mobile really quick because I want to show you basically why I got into this and what is so interesting about it. This is this horrible slide up from the mobile enterprise landscape. This is Emergence Capital. They're a VC firm. I actually worked with them a lot back when I was at Box on helping them like build these kinds of things. But this literally is a map of all of the mobile productivity products that have been on the market, are on the market in the like more enterprise category. So when I was at Box, this was my job. I worried about getting every single mobile productivity app integrated with Box. So what I did to get that there was run this horribly ugly looking program, but it was cool then, called OneCloud, where we integrated all these mobile apps with Box. So basically I'd call up, I'd create maps like this, and I'd call up, or like email, all of the founders from all these different mobile productivity companies and be like, you should work with Box. Would you consider it? And the thing is, it worked. We got to over 1,000 mobile apps integrated, and we didn't build the integrations. They built the integrations. So it gave me a really good education early. This is Aaron, CEO, showing OneCloud. This is our really ugly like app store on iOS. Woohoo! This is a t-shirt we made. We had a freaking billboard, y'all. Like, OneCloud was a big deal. Mobile was a big deal. But this is where I doubled down and just got a ton of expertise. So I got to know all these different founders. I basically was, at that point, picking winners, where it was like, who's going to be the best in mobile and who's just kind of a stinker and not going to go anywhere. So that is what I focused on. And what was really interesting about that, sort of my biggest takeaway for trend predicting for everyone here is if you want to get good at predicting a future trend, especially in a specific category, just hitch your wagon really seriously to an existing trend that's going really well. Because if you go super deep and get an expertise in a trend that is actively unfolding and has a lot of momentum, the thing that comes out of it will be really obvious and you'll know how to spot that. This might be a really boring topic in general. I just find enterprise software interesting, so apologies if it is boring. But what was really, really interesting about like getting deep on this mobile productivity category is that it led me into my framework. It was also this sort of like renaissance of productivity apps in mobile. So like Mailbox, Boxer, there were a million other email apps. Do you guys remember Mailbox? I feel like the room is like a little bit of a different set of generations for Mailbox, but like Mailbox was such a big deal. Like they were the future of everything. These are both calendaring apps. There were a million other calendaring apps. Calendaring apps were super exciting. Venture capitalists were like putting money into all of these things. And what's really interesting, and this is what led me to messaging as the next major platform, is that at this exact same time, there were a ton of enterprise messaging apps coming out. So if you looked in 2012, Hall was an enterprise messaging app, CoTap was an enterprise messaging app, and there was clearly a lot of movement in that category. You know what's really interesting about it? CoTap was founded by the ex-founder of Yammer. CoTap had the insights and the people that should have led it to become the next best, biggest messaging platform in enterprise. Like Yammer was huge, and it was enterprise, and it got bought by Microsoft. That's a big deal. But for some reason, it ended up being Slack, started by the old founder of Flickr. Like, wonder why, you know, just consumerization of IT, but there's no perfect way to predict these trends. And that's what's really interesting about it. One thing about this trend in mobile, the incumbents were so slow. Salesforce 1 came out like 2 years ago. Salesforce did not move at all. And then other sort of major, like Microsoft didn't get its suite onto iOS or Android forever. So it left this huge green space for all these startups to pop up and be like, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. And some of them have really grown up and gotten big. At this point, I would say a trend is that like large incumbents are learning how to get agile. Everyone's probably read that article about Dancing with Giants and how Google's really good at moving fast, even though they're huge. With these large incumbents moving so slowly, there was an opportunity. Today, it's much harder. So today, the incumbents, when they see a strategy, like my team runs partner and developer marketing. We just announced a partnership with Oracle. Like, we're a 3.5-year-old company. Oracle's moving fast that they want to partner with us, and Oracle is not known for being fast moving, in case you weren't aware. In order to sign up for the software that we are integrating, you literally have to call your salesperson and say, I would like the software. You literally can't find a button and click and use it. So that's how slow they are, but they're like, this is a trend, Slack is happening, we have to partner with Slack, we're actually going to get on it fast and build a bot now. So the incumbents have really sped up, and that's a trend that actually could affect things in a really interesting, challenging way. So the most obvious thing that I'm trying to make you take away here is that the mobile trend led to the messaging trend. So everyone was on their phones all the time. What you want to do on your phone all the time is messaging, and now messaging has erupted. It's super obvious, but I think it's your most important takeaway. If you want to figure out what's going to happen next, get to know what's happening now, and you will see the things that come together as you put all the pieces together. The other one that's just like interesting to observe is that trends become really, really standard very quickly. So I want to make sure I know my time too. For example, mobile, like, is mobile a trend anymore? Like, yeah, mobile is affecting us a lot every single day, but no one's like, oh, mobile is so hot. Except for Oracle, who tried to put that in our blog post, and I said, that's old. So basically, where does messaging come in? Mobile messaging came out of mobile, essentially, but like it's on all platforms. This is super interesting. We spend all of our time messaging each other, no matter what the app is. This is from Mary Meeker's report that she does every year. Just like the amount of time people spend in these products is absurd. For our customers at Slack, 2.5 hours a day, like doing stuff. 8 or 9 hours open every day. Like our users are in our product. It's amazing. So what's the messaging trend? And I'm sure this was actually in one of the readings for this class as well. I just screenshotted it. Bots. So I talk about apps on Slack because we decided not to name bots, name the things built on us bots. It's been a big internal debate. Half the things built on us are bots. But it's productivity apps and bots that are built on top of messaging. The idea is where you are working. So like if you're sitting in Slack for 8 hours a day, actively working in it for 8 hours a day, and you need to approve an expense, where's the best place for you to approve the expense? Right there. It's so easy. Instead of me having to be like, as a manager, I have to log out or go to my email, see the expense thing, click, log into the expense reporting software, find the expense report to be approved, and then say, yes, approved, and then go back to Slack where I was already working. When it comes in Slack, I get a notification in Slack, approve the expense report. I click a button, yes, it's done. So that is why messaging as a platform is really interesting and really fun. So we've been working on it actively. With over 155,000 weekly active devs, that's actually more like 180,000. That means we have developers who hit our APIs every week. 180,000 of them. It's really high, which is really exciting. We have strong customer adoption of our apps and our bots that people build on Slack, which is really fun, and over 1,000 apps. So that is it on the messaging platform piece. Any questions on that section? Cool, we're gonna go through space really fast. So my last job at Bessemer, I basically got to work closely with two partners. I did everything from sourcing to diligence to observing boards and working with founders. I'm now advising one of the companies I invested in in a formal capacity. Bessemer was the company that coined these sort of landscapey things that I just showed you. They did it for cloud SaaS. If you're interested at all in looking at trends and understanding them, Bessemer, Christina Shed and Byron Dieter put out a report on sort of the state of cloud computing. I think it's some of the best work that has been done, period, on trend reports. They just go super deep. They are extremely smart, and they are really good at predicting trends. So at Bessemer, it's really academic. It's sort of like being at school, but also having to be someone's slave and work all the time. We had roadmaps. So roadmaps are really, really fun. Roadmaps are basically I think this topic is interesting, and here are all my reasons. Here's the thesis behind why we should go invest in this category. It's literally building frameworks or predicting trends like we're talking about. And my favorite one that we had was our space tech roadmap, because literally it meant we got to invest in companies that go to outer space. So they have some really great pieces on it, but let's just look at the macro trends that led them to these conclusions, because I think it's fun to see how other people are thinking about creating frameworks for pulling apart trends. So this is a great quote at the top. Basically, all the technology that's in space right now, or the majority of technology that's in space right now, is wildly outdated. It was put up there in the 60s and 70s, and since then, because of Moore's law, what we are able to do with computing is so far beyond what's up in space. So the basic is, we needed to fix this. This is a problem. The second thing that's really, really interesting is that because of the crisis in 2008, governments got out of space. It's what are we doing there? Why are we putting more money there? They focused on the private sector and took all the layers of bureaucracy out of getting into space. So now you see a ton of private companies that are going up there, like SpaceX. And they're able to because there's a lot less regulation than there used to be, and there's just less competition with the government. Computing costs, so suddenly computing costs have gone way down, and then 3D printing is really huge. So the last thing that's really fun about, so as I mentioned, if you get an expertise in one thing, then you're able to really understand the next set of trends. Bessemer invested in Skybox. Do you guys know Skybox? So Skybox is a satellite company. They built cheap satellites and sent them into space, and the idea was that they would image the Earth and sell the imaging data to all different kinds of private and public companies, and government and all these different people. Skybox was an early Bessemer investment through Network. It was kind of that's a really great idea. It got bought by Google a couple years ago, so they're operating with Google now. They're doing with Google currently. They're doing really great. But what's super interesting about Skybox is that we were on the board, obviously, and so they built these amazing, potentially cheaper satellites, but they were still expensive. It was still $1 million per satellite. And then they'd be how do we get this thing into space? And to get a satellite into space, you have to find a rocket that will take your content and get it up there at the right angle, in the right kind of orbit for what you built. That's really hard. So Skybox and my friend who was on the board, they had to go to the Ukraine to get their satellite on a rocket. And one of their early first launches, the rocket just blew up. And there's not Ukrainian rocket insurance. You just invested $1 million building this awesome satellite that's the future of your business, and you're trying to get it in space, and your rockets are blowing up. What are you supposed to do? So this is what led to us to Bessemer saying, space tech is going to be super interesting, and there's a huge issue with getting stuff into space. So the next investment that they made is a company in New Zealand called Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab 3D prints rockets, almost entirely. I just met another company that actually does it entirely, but Rocket Lab 3D prints rockets for the most part, gets them into space. Rocket Lab has hundreds of millions of dollars in orders from satellite companies trying to get their rockets into space. They're not even fully launching them yet, but they're now valued at over $1 billion because of just the volume of requests they have to get stuff into space. And extra cool, New Zealand is just very small and very chill, and they will literally shut down their airspace once a month to let rockets go up into space. And it's at the right place on the globe to put you in the right orbit. So, kind of a cool trend, right? I find space cool. Developer tools. This is like my heart and soul, my bread and butter. So basically, Bessemer invested in all these companies. Shopify and Twilio are two of the biggest IPOs in the last couple years. So huge outcomes. They literally just build APIs, which are developer tools for building blocks for building stuff. What are the macro trends? Software is eating the world. So if software is eating the world, if you supply the people who are building the software with their bricks and their jeans and all the Levi Strauss kind of story with the gold rush, you make a lot of money. We're also projected to have a lot of developers. How many of you are developers in the room? All right, like half. So there are a lot of developers. They're doing really great work. And the last thing that's super interesting, that's a mega macro trend that hits a ton of industries, including Slack really hard, is that developers have buying power. We at Slack are deployed hugely at Bank of America. Want to know why? Because Bank of America wants to attract developers, and developers love using Slack. That was their first reason. And Slack has lots of other great benefits outside of that, but that's one of the major reasons that Bank of America uses Slack for recruiting developers. Cool. So what can you take away? Trends beget trends. That's kind of obvious. Most of this is just being curious about how things work and why they work, and then looking at all the pieces that come together around them. And then finally, there are a lot of ways to predict trends. So the framework that I showed you earlier from my sort of enterprise software set of frameworks, that applies to a very specific kind of paradigm. So I'm looking at enterprise software and platforms that could have developers build on them. So it's really easy to build a framework for something that's very similar to itself. For space and developers, those are some really random other topics, but you can predict them by looking at the macro trends around them and then getting to know a couple of pinpoints really well. Does that resonate okay? Cool. So let's go into media. So, media macro trends. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in media. I will say when I was at Bessemer, I created and ran the video roadmap, so I did get a little bit of depth here, and I find the whole category super fascinating. So if we look at the macro trends around media, mobile is definitely a big one, undeniably. We are connected to the media all the freaking time. The internet, connectivity, kind of the same deal. Social networks, so suddenly CNN and BBC and other repudiated sources are not just my media, you're my media. You're my media. If I'm friends with you, suddenly you are a news source for me. What are other trends that sort of led to, or that you think are contributing to media in general right now and its shifts? Data? Can you expand a little bit?
The idea that you now have, you can mine data or,
Yeah.
access data from different sources, compile that, and then figure out storytelling.
Exactly. So you can storytell a lot of directions, yeah. And data is so accessible. And our data is really accessible, so we can be told certain stories that people know we'll like.
That's right.
Yeah, it's scary. Yeah.
Communities or
Mm-hmm.
closest places to get the story behind the stories or to establish two-way streets between us and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So different kind of access, and communities are really big right now. Yeah. 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 We are all creators. I also just really like that whole topic. Yeah.
Maybe this is just another way of saying that, but kind of the way in which the world moves closer together means that there's a shorter cycle for news, it seems like. Things don't stay in people's attentions.
Mm-hmm.
Something that about 2 days ago people forget about.
Yeah. I'd almost say volume. There's kind of a trend around pure volume, and maybe it's also human distraction. The level of distraction we're at is high right now. Cool. Yeah.
I'd also say current politics.
Yes.
I'd say the bigger context, not just the tech that they know about actually tech ability, but just the whole context that you're working in as the not normal.
Mm-hmm. I actually think the political one is super significant because I didn't actually pull this out as a trend or as a thing to follow, but it's really interesting to think about media in China and tech in China versus here, and the way things are going, and just because it's such it's a more regulated place and more controlled on the media high level, but I think I was going to say like follow trends in China, but it's like, but their government controls a lot more. But is it a problem that our government is just like all over the place with tweeting? So interesting topics. If anyone have any other ones? Yeah.
I was just saying, like, video is becoming much more powerful.
Yes.
Like, when I was living in India, I saw that people were learning via video, and then they're using their mobile phones to watch movies much more often in more places. So access and the need for deeper content.
Yeah. Yeah, no, video is one of like my significant ones here. I think it's fascinating. You could get anything on YouTube. Yeah.
And also a trend towards experiences, so like live events and offline, you kind of have to be there in moments.
Absolutely. That's one of my later questions. This is awesome. So I'm going to go into like a couple of different trends in media and just sort of share musings. They're more food for thought than like conclusive. So to start, I'm going to go with a really old one because this happened years ago, but it's still happening. This is a horrible chart that I drew back when I was at Bessemer. But essentially, who here has heard of influencers? So there are all these people on these platforms that can create content, and they end up getting massive followings. And when I say massive followings, I mean like millions and millions of people who subscribe to them on YouTube or follow them on Twitter or follow them on Instagram or follow them on Snapchat or back in the day Vine. So what's really interesting about the technology platforms and what they've done to influence is that before, if you were a regular human, like any of us in this room, you probably had like this much influence. Like you could influence your friends, your people at work, your family. But if you wanted to go get hundreds of thousands of people to donate to your GoFundMe campaign, you did not have a way to do that and you were not famous. So if you wanted to have like more influence, this is a horribly drawn thing, or if you wanted to be more valuable, you needed to work with Disney, who have a lot of power and had a lot of followers, or you needed to work with, big news outlets or any big media outlet to actually reach millions of other humans. Today, with social media platforms, that graph is just bumped up, where it's like, you could have this much influence and power over like other people's opinions, and you would never have touched Disney or CNN or any major influential agency. You might just be on YouTube, and you might have gathered 10 million followers on YouTube, and now suddenly 10 million people give a crap about what you think. That's amazing. Like, there's an economy that comes out of that. And if you just look at the beauty industry alone, the beauty industry on YouTube is insane. When, I don't know, who's a beauty expert on YouTube? What's that one? Michelle Pham. You guys heard of Michelle Pham? When Michelle Pham, who has millions of followers on YouTube, says buy this lipstick, millions of people buy the lipstick. Like, that's buying power. It's crazy. And it works for other things. So I thought it'd be funny. This might be a really interesting breakdown of like the room's sort of like age demographics, honestly. But do we know who these people are? Who's that? So Casey Neistat, he's in New York, he's super cool. I highly suggest watching his videos. Shane Dawson, less people know Shane. Hands for Shane? Okay, like a couple people know Shane. So Shane's more of like a millennial favorite. Jenna Marbles. When I was at Stanford, I remember sitting in my dorm room watching old Jenna videos when they were coming out then. She's now my favorite again. I love her so much. Anyone know this one? Miranda sings. So Miranda is this woman named Colleen who puts on extra lipstick and acts like an idiot and has like 7 million or 8 million subscribers and has a show on Netflix. Okay, anyone know this one? What's cool about Sophia? Yeah, she graduated like 2 years ago. So just to show you sort of the like span, Jenna started when I was in college, way before that, when I was in high school. And has been on YouTube for like over a decade, I think. And is doing a full-time living on it. She's like in her 30s. She's got a basketball game tomorrow, if you watch her and know what I'm quoting. Sophia just graduated Stanford a couple years ago, worked for BuzzFeed, and realized she could be famous. And now she's getting in this game, and that's probably going to be her career too. These are job opportunities that never existed before. And they have power over advertisers in a way they could use to make a lot of money. So when I was at Bessemer, I kind of thought figuring out how to leverage influencers would be a really, really interesting market. And so these are just a couple of logos of companies that did this. But here's the really interesting thing. I was like, trend spotted. Like, influencers have millions of followers. People buy whatever they tell them to buy. Like, There's gotta be money in influencers. Turns out, this company's like a lifestyle business. They basically like make enough but are never gonna be big. They got bought by Google for not that much money. They basically figured out how to connect influencers to advertisers and focus on like long tail influencers who had lots of little followings to get advertisers to buy stuff. Google's using them on the YouTube team, but like they're not huge. This company is called Vessel. Has anyone heard of it? So not tons. Vessel raised $300 million. Vessel, I was in the room with the CEO, most incredible CEO I've ever been in a room with. And I've been in a room with like more important people, like more important CEOs. But that guy was convincing. They built the most beautiful, perfectly designed video platform you've ever seen. Sold off to Verizon for like pennies. Failed trend, maybe. Or maybe there's something to come. Who knows? So, that's an interesting one. Patreon, they're still kind of going, and I kind of love them. Also created by a Stanford grad. There's like a lot of Stanford grads in this section, which is pretty cool. So here's what's hard. These are influencers. Lily's big on YouTube. Colleen, forget her name. Issa Murray. Yeah, she's like huge. Look at where they've signed. Look at what network they're going with. They're going to the big players. And like YouTube maybe is like the smaller player in some ways, but it's also not. And it seems like Lily has really signed in with YouTube heavily. When you go around New York and they're doing ads, they're all of Lily's face. And I think that was their counter to the fact that Colleen went to Netflix. But the big players are able to throw around their weight, and they can pick up the influencers when they want them and get their influence. This show, Haters Back Off, is so bad. Like, I love Miranda. I love Colleen. I love all of it. It's so hard to watch. It's signed a second season. You know why? Because she just has a followership that does not care how bad the content is. We will watch her no matter what. Like, you literally don't care if it's bad. You're just interested in her, so you follow it. It's a pretty interesting thing. So, yeah, that one's perplexing and kind of an interesting conundrum and maybe a trend. And then I just kind of wanted to do a little RIP. This is a really interesting one. Vine. Vine was huge. Vine grew significant influencers. Vine is gone. Vessel got a lot of funding, was trying to become a Vine or a YouTube or like the next major platform. Built amazing software. They got influencers. My best friend worked for Vessel. Her job was getting influencers to move to Vessel. She got a lot of influencers to Vessel. It just didn't work. And then Beam. Do you guys know Beam? So Casey Neistat, the guy in the far with the glasses. If you watch any of these influencers, Casey's the best one to watch, by the way. Suggested most highly. Safia, if you're feeling in the mood for Stanford and beauty. Beam is Casey Neistat's app. So one of the other like potential trends is like, could these people with all their influence create technology products and use their influence to push people to adopt the technology products? Turns out no. Casey built an app, had a whole team, and they shut it down. It just didn't work. So, yeah.
Did they recently get acquired though by like Stanford or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if anything's happening still.
I think it was like a little more of an acqui-hire, but it was a good exit for them that they could not have to just shut it down. And Vine was acquired too by Twitter, so it was like not like it just went away. Was it? Am I right? Yeah. Vessel was also acquired. These are all kind of like acquired and shut down, and that's what happens. So one of the things I'm going to get to is like consolidation. It seems like it's the current trend, which is interesting. So if we look at video, to what we were talking about with sort of video being a huge trend right now, here are a couple of topics within video that I think are interesting. So the macro trends are the same as the ones we talked about before, but here's some interesting like topics to dive in on. Live is super interesting. So do you guys remember Periscope and Meerkat? When that was like, wow, Periscope and Meerkat. Like, I was chasing Meerkat. But, oh no, I was chasing Meerkat. We invested in Periscope at Bessemer like before they got really big. So the day that he was deciding to like go get bought by Twitter, I got to go to Kayvon and be like, here's a term sheet. Want to keep trying? And he was like, no, I have a really good outcome ahead of me. So those are super interesting. Bessemer is the biggest investor in Twitch. Twitch is a weird trend. People like to watch people play video games. The coolest part about that is that they figured that out because they built Justin TV, and this was a teeny part of Justin TV. So that was a previous company. And the CTO of Justin TV was like, I want to take this teeny part of Justin TV and turn it into a whole business. That was a huge outcome. Like, that was a huge success and has so many users. People do like watching live video. So live, I think, live is not a new trend. Live has been going on since TV existed. But how live works with our current set of technology, I think, is still being debated. And this is Mob Crush. It's a mobile version of Twitch, basically. So this was a big race. But here's what's really interesting about that one. Consolidation is kind of hard. Like, when your success depends on how many people are viewing, the platforms with the most users seem to keep winning. So Facebook Live and Instagram Live, they seem like they're kind of eating, I don't even know if Meerkat exists anymore, and Periscope, I know Twitter's doing a lot of live stuff. I don't know if it's Periscope specific, but it feels like this is where the momentum is right now. So I don't have more thoughts on live than that, but I think consolidation is scary. I also think live is really hard. This is another interesting one. I was at school. I was at Stanford when Evan was here. One of my friends got subpoenaed in the court case about who was founder, et cetera, et cetera. The fun thing about the start of Snapchat is literally Evan just wanted to have disappearing videos or disappearing photos. That's all he cared about. But I think the really cool thing and really interesting thing about Snapchat is that Snapchat takes all these trends that we were like video, photo, messaging, those are separate trends, and it just sort of an AR, augmented reality, it just smushes all of them together. So in the world of Snapchat, video and photo are literally almost the same. I send my sister Snapchats, some of them are videos, some of them are photos. They're not different. They're the same thing. You send them a text, that's the same thing too. It's just blurring all the lines of the trends. Augmented reality in Snapchat, it's not now I'm going into AR mode, I'm gonna be a dog. It's just a photo. But it's actually augmented reality. So what I think is really interesting about the trends that Snapchat has capitalized on is Snapchat is built for digital natives. These things that we as people, and maybe people in the room are digital natives, but the things that we as people who are not digital native are oh, that's artificial intelligence, and this is cloud computing. Those are not different. Those are just the same thing. So when you can take a bunch of macro trends and combine them for the person who thinks that they're really all the same, you suddenly get this exciting product that digital natives love to use. And then once again to the consolidation or the big players crushing little players point, this is rather scary for Snapchat. So if you look at the numbers, Instagram has overtaken Snapchat in story consumption. Snapchat's valuation has gone way down because Instagram is kind of squashing them pretty effectively. I'd love to do a little poll actually, just out of interest. This is not this is not a valid study, but how many people feel like they've moved to Instagram stories more than Snapchat stories in the last couple months? All right, how many people are still doing Snapchat hard? All right, this is interesting. I think my sister, who's 4 or 5 years younger than me, is still more Snapchat, but I've definitely moved to Instagram, and I don't know why. So this is the last trend that I find really interesting in the video category, and it's not a proven one. So video creation, to the sort of video as a trend point. When I was at Bessemer, we invested in a company called Nomi. Nomi allowed you to stitch together a bunch of content and voiceover on it, so you created these really great storytelling apps or videos, and I thought they were amazing. There's a new company called something that I will show you right now that's literally doing the same thing, but I actually I think this could be a really interesting trend to follow to see if they do well, and I wanted to show you their product in action. So this is almost the same thing as Nomi. This just came out on this just came out on Product Hunt last week, so it's a very new product.
I came here today to talk about the pros and cons of my favorite website, Twitter.com.
So it lets you build this
Pro,
video.
Amazing place to complain. Con, equally amazing place to embarrass yourself. Pro, I got my job on this website. Hi, Ian. Con, if I ever lose my job, it will probably be because of how I acted on this website. Pro, you can come here to make friends. Con, I've completely lost my sense of reality and what a real friend means. Also, I rarely hang out with any of these people and instead just hang out alone at home on this website talking about being lonely. Pro, great for when you're bored. Con, it's a huge waste of time. Pro, it's a really easy place to meet dudes. shout out redacted. Con, I ruined my last relationship on this website. Pro, it's a great place to get attention. Con, I have a completely diluted idea of what matters in life. Where do we stand? Let me know in the comments. I'm still about to...
Okay, so, oops. That's super simple, but the product is called Captioned. They're not live yet. They're like in our private beta, but they'll be coming out. I'm super curious to watch if they succeed. I actually think that like a product like this that's really easy to use to stitch content together. As you can see, you can pull any content from the internet, any memes you want, and you can do your own video of yourself too. She didn't do that. I think it could be a really powerful video creation tool because you can story tell a little more through it instead of just, and one of the most popular topics on YouTube is just story time. So if you watch influencers, just watching stories is a pretty big human need that people like to fulfill.
I was wondering, your VC like investing in that company, is your goal that they get bought by like Facebook? Because it's cool to make the videos, but people want to share them, and they're going to share them using either like a different platform.
Yeah.
So by itself, it's not that special. And if it's that cool, then I'm nervous that Facebook's just going to figure out what they're doing and do it themselves.
So if you look at like the dev, so in consumer, basically if there's anything Facebook can make, it's scary. So there's just a fact of like in consumer tech, Facebook is really fast to ship, and you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But you still want to bet on players that could beat them because there's a shot you could beat them. And they are the way you distribute, but there are other places you can distribute. And eventually if enough people get on your platform, you become distribution. So you could make your own network, even though it's pretty hard to unseat them. The other thinking there is like, if you think about dev tools, the idea, like if I'm investing in a company that helps people build websites, or this is harder, that helps people build Slack apps, I'm not worried that like Slack is gonna go eat that product in a negative way. Like it benefits Slack to own the technology for building products on top of them, but that could also just exist outside of us. So basically you build an outcomes table, and the outcomes table says a middling outcome is probably like a decent size acquisition, and then a really successful outcome is a like either mega acquisition for billions or an IPO for billions. So you basically do percentage like chances of hitting all those outcomes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. Like, what do you think that these kind of products have to do beyond just getting users? I mean, I'm thinking of like Dub Smash and Yik Yak as two like notable failures that did raise a lot of money, had a lot of users.
I chased that deal. I went to Atlanta. Yeah.
For Yik Yak?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they didn't do much after raising the 60 million round, but just curious. I mean, like they had huge, I would say product market fit, and were very deeply embedded into high schools around America.
I know.
What do they need to do?
So the biggest thing that people thought with Yik Yak and like reasons to fail is that an anonymous network doesn't actually have network effects that bring you back. So on Facebook, I have a profile that I maintain that like people know it's me and it's like my brand. But if I made a really funny comment on Yik Yak last year, no one knows that was me. And when I come back, like no one cares, which is interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure. Anonymous blew up though. That was not very fun to chase those ones.
And what about something like Dub Smash? Sorry.
Dub Smash, from a VC perspective, we actually looked at it as like a flash in the pan, even though they had so many users that you invested for the sake of like, they're just blowing up. You have to see if they could do something well. But like, I remember talking about that one, just being like, how does this become meaningful over time? It's just kind of like a little tool. So.
I guess I'm just curious, why is that different in your mind than the product that you showed us?
Because this one's a lot more storytelling and has like more potential for long-term like people wanting to come back to it and tell stories together. Though, you could argue the other way around. People invested in Dub Smash. It did decently in terms of investment. So, yeah. I want to go fast through the rest of this, so I'm going to go really fast. So, newsletters. I'm just going to do this one like super fast. Who would have predicted this trend? I think this trend is actually just capitalizing on the fact that like people used to wake up and get their newspaper in the morning and go read it over coffee, people want to get to work, open their computer, and read their newspaper over coffee, and they like to have it delivered to the place where they check first, which is their email. It's not a very frameworky trend, it's just interesting. There's also a lot of potential for this on Slack, so people get to work and open Slack. We have an HBR bot for Slack. I could show you a video, kind of out of time, so I'm not going to, but Bloomberg is going to ship in the next like month a really cool app for Slack that allows you to subscribe to either like a morning, noon, or evening digest, get like breaking news alerts, and there's one other thing it does. Do like news lookups or stock lookups. Pretty cool. It's like a new way for people to deliver news and access it. I can show you the video of HBR and like why they decided to build this, but I'm just going to skip forward. to just get to the end of this. I think this is another major trend in media. You mentioned it. Fake news, echo chambers, and backlash. I do wonder, to your point, about people wanting to have offline experiences now, if that could become a massive trend, or if it will just be like sort of a niche trend. I think that in some ways Burning Man is a good example of people wanting to have in real life experiences. We are pretty addicted to our technology at this point. I don't know if you know how many times you check certain social media sites every day, or apps. 40? Yeah, there's an average. I didn't look it up, but it's high. It's scary. I mean, it's something I'm thinking about. I'm like, I need to be able to focus and do work, and literally my brain wants me to go open Facebook. It's like, that's an addiction. Like, it's not casual. I'm really curious what trends will emerge here in terms of backlash, especially as a result of government crackdown, especially on Facebook. So will Facebook take a hit to its valuation as ads and like political ads become a much bigger deal? So here's, I don't have a framework for media. I think that focusing in on the macro trends at play is probably the best way to really dig in on what potentially could happen in media. I also think human behavior, so like for the newsletter point, like humans like waking up and seeing their news, so human behavior is a top indicator. So just thinking about like, and like for the apps, the video apps, I think humans like telling stories, so that's like a human behavior guess. Without a new device, so without like a new phone or a new operating system that we're all going to move to on the horizon, are we just in consolidation? So would that make, like, is it just the big players like eating up everyone else and kind of winning again? If you were going to make a framework out of that, it would be like you introduce a new device, aka a phone or like a new app or a new operating system type of thing. That disrupts everything. So we're kind of coming out maybe of a big like turmoil moment for the last 15 years in media. And then you see all the shakeout after the disruption. And at the end half of that, you see consolidation. And then eventually, are we going to get really into augmented reality? Or like, are our watches with like, interesting, did you hear about the Amazon glasses? These are so cool. Amazon announced that they're making like glasses that are connected with voice, but they talk back to you by like pulsing your bones.
Bone conducting.
Yeah, bone conducting. And they wouldn't have a camera. So like, will wearables become a thing? Takeaways. So this is just sort of the final bit. Get to know emerging trends really well, and you'll be able to predict the next one. Curiosity is everything. Just be curious in the world around you if you want to predict trends. I think that's how you do it. I lifted this from the HBR article that Anne had everyone read. Look back 2 times to look forward 1 time. I do think it's true. If you look back double through like a couple of trends, you can see some sort of rhyming potential for what's going to happen. Human behavior. We build our technology, we consume our media because we're people. So look at psychology and how humans like to act. And then you just really can't know everything. So in the world of trend prediction and frameworks, there's a lot of room to fail. Segways and Vessel are a great example of that. People put big bets on them. And then outstanding questions. In entertainment, is there a new technology platform that could beat the incumbents? To the question of like, why would you invest in a video-related app, knowing Facebook is crushing a pretty damn big video app, Snapchat? That's scary. Netflix, $6 billion in content this year. They will just continue to crush anyone who wants to take them on. This is another interesting one. So this woman is Samantha Power. She worked for Obama all 8 years. She was a UN ambassador. I got to meet her last week for some reason. It was awesome. And she's really freaked out by Facebook and the echo chamber, and then also like the way that potentially Russia worked to divide our nation harder with political ads. It's pretty interesting. Like the level of anger and like tension that we're in right now as a country and maybe as a world is really high, and that's largely because of media and social media. So how can we break and like unify and forgive and have grace and like love? It's a really hard question. Are we just subject to like our humanity, which says like, my response is to get angry back at you? So those are my big questions. That's all.